Hello, my name is Spencer Salmon, and I am doing a presentation for animal science regarding if animals should be given GMO feed. Starting off, we'll go into the history of GMOs. Basically, the usage of genetically modified crops began a long time ago, but recently started to pick up an increase in popularity starting in 1996. The main principle behind genetic modification comes from the central dogma of protein synthesis, which goes in the direction of DNA to RNA to protein. Modification of the DNA of crops can create certain desired characteristics in these crops, which are better for farmers. Most crops that were introduced were things such as maize, soybean, cotton, and canola. These crops are typically designed to create increased resistance to many different diseases, insects, or herbicides. Crops are usually genetically modified in order to allow for increased productivity in farms, allowing lower prices for their product and increased profit margins for the farm. In the article by Clazen J. DeVos and Mananon Swanenberg, they explain how crops are examined based on various principles, including their molecular structure, their composition, phenotypic traits, and agronomic traits. These traits are compared to those of the normal counterpart in the analysis to determine if these can be used. If composition is substantially modified, then the crop is typically analyzed in a 90-day trial with the rodents to establish safety and efficacy. Overall, these crops have not had huge modifications yet when used for consumption. So moving on to the ethical issues of this topic, one of the main ethical issues is animals may have more issues digesting foods that are genetically modified and different. By modifying the genetics, synthesized proteins may be different. In these organisms, the DNA is located on the chromosome, and certain traits may be specific to the chromosome. So all the DNA associated with one specific chromosome may be attached to that. If editing of a certain part of a chromosome causes latter effects, it may be very dangerous for the animal eating these crops. This is an issue due to the possibility of entirely different genetic code of genetically modified organisms. Genetically modified organisms could also have byproducts during digestion that are different than their normal counterparts that may impact humans. During digestion, certain waste products could be left in the blood and not filtered out by the kidneys, or certain products of the genetically modified crop itself. This could ultimately make it into the mouths of people. This causes issues with the possibility of hurting people by using the genetically modified food, even though it is eaten by the animal. As discussed in class as well, many animal extremist groups exist that may have issues with animals being given genetically modified feed. Ultimately, this can also cause them to react to farms that used genetically modified crops. The biggest concern for these animal rights groups may be the lack of enough research in the subject. Many of these groups also jump to conclusions very quickly and can cause quite a bit of harm. So moving on, we will also look at the sociological impact or the impact that this may have on people and society. The usage of genetically modified crops overall is great for people and can improve the quality of life in many ways. This can greatly reduce the cost associated with owning animals and ultimately price for consumers. By having to use less pesticides and antibiotics, the farm can save a lot of money and be able to sell their animal products at a much cheaper cost. Genetically modified crops also may have less of a chance of harboring dangerous foodborne bacteria that can find its way to animals or people. By reducing the chance of infecting animals, animals have improved well-being and less visits from veterinarians. Animal products also would not be wasted due to contamination. One of the most important things about this as well is the issue with fixed land in the world. The population of the world is constantly increasing with no increase in the amount of land. With improved crop efficiency, animals could have much more land and farms because of less agriculture that would be required and therefore less space associated with agriculture. This could also allow for more land for settlements and people. By using genetically modified crops for animals, we could possibly also increase the nutritional characteristics as well that can improve the quality of life for animals. This overall will lead to improved output and happier farm in general. When the animals are given crops that help keep them healthy, less work will be necessary on farms overall. So, moving on to some of the data, this was actually collected in the paper that I was discussing earlier. So, the paper by Claesen J. DeVos and Mann and Swanenberg also has two figures in the research which were beneficial in proving how safe GMOs in animal feed actually are as well. In the graph on the left, it shows the health effects of different combinations of GMO crops fed to 3 different animal species. As you can see, there were some health effects on the animals. The most was in pigs that were fed genetically modified maize. So, however, in the second graph that you will see on the right, it shows why these results occurred the way they did. First of all, the data did show an immune response was observed in animals fed GMO crops, but this could simply be due to the digestive system's unfamiliarity with the slightly different crop, not necessarily causing any long-term health issues. The most important portion for people raising animals for production is involving the hematology. The hematology did not show any observed changes of biological significance because this is looking at the blood of the animals. This shows that the GMO feed did not cause any significant changes in the blood of the animals that would ultimately find its way into consumer products of the animal or its products as well. The histopathology portion also did not show any observed changes of biological significance. The histopathology is important because it looks at the actual cells of the animal's body looking for changes. This did not show any microscopic changes through analysis, which is very important for the actual cells because that is the main processes where metabolism and all the important physiological responses for the animals is occurring. Finally, the clinical examination showed no observed changes with GMO-fed animals, which is why that's great. So it's very important that this happened as well. So this was all done by analyzed specialists and all of that. So this was very important as well. Overall, all of this data proves very well that GMO crops are very beneficial for animals as well as people. While some aspects may be a bit concerning, the benefits far surpass the risks of using GMO products in animal feed, at least in this perspective with the crops and the species that were analyzed during the research paper that was discussed in this portion, as well as in some other situations as well, with previously discussing how many important steps that all of these GMO crops must go through to make sure that they will be safe and work well for people. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I will now let my presentation go on to one.